Are we rolling? Looks like it. Sweet. Okay, sorry if this is really echoey. I'm filming this from a bathroom right now because it's the only place quiet that I can find. Okie dokie. So, audubonii behavior. Specifically, we will be looking at their freeze and dash in connection to the Tinbergen's 4 types of questions in relation to hypotheses for animal behavior, of which, going into those 4 areas are within proximate questions. You have, what are the mechanisms behind it, and what are the developmental purposes behind it? And then in ultimate questions, you have what are the survival values and what are the evolutionary phylogenetic benefits. So I'm going to let these first few clips that don't have much value to them play while I go over this, and I may stop to comment on them in a second. But as I was saying, so within mechanistic sayings for their freezing. In fact, you can see it right now in the video. They are all frozen, ears up, and then they dash. So mechanisms that make them do that tend to be, or that were observed to, were loud noises, people walking by, people staring at them like I was trying to get footage here. And so in doing that, we find that, well, as you can see, they freeze and then they dash from a lot of those things. In this case, this guy will dash after someone revs their motorcycle. That's really common for cars and motorcycles, which lends to a hypothesis of mine, particularly to the urban environment, that noise pollution contributes to stress probably on the bunny system and has heightened that, kind of in connection to let me real fast pull it up. The KCJ Wagner et al.'s shrub encroachment causing increased fear in the bunny population. I think there is also a correlation between noise pollution, and it could be in connection with the shrubs you see there, that it could be hiding in there to be heightened fears. Under developmental, while that was not exactly studied in this, I can throw a hypothesis out there on the developmental history of the freeze and dash. I would assume that, while innately genetic, I do think sociocultural, or I guess an animal cultural tradition, probably heightens a fear of surrounding, or a learned behavior. It gives a learned behavior to the animal. In the ultimate category, we move into survival value, and I think survival value is fairly clear here. They freeze in the hope that an animal doesn't notice them, but they become concerned that the animal does notice them too clearly, or it's looking to stock up on them, as can be seen right here when I tried to move up and get a better angle to film the bunny, and they bolted. They will then dash. And so, essentially, they value a flight over fight response. They don't fight, they just fly, or in this case, skip away. And so, hypothesis in connection to that, I would suppose that one could say that due to their small nature, they have evolved over time to run rather than fight and stand. Within the evolutionary standpoint of this, how did this evolve in the creatures? This really goes back to developmental theory on them, that probably a lot of it's genetic, but it can also be socially learned. Especially what to be afraid of. Because one thing I did learn, as you're seeing here, this is actually the very last thing I filmed, not the next slide. They really started to become friendly here. And the more I worked with the bunnies, the more friendly they became. Friendly is maybe not the correct term. Trusting is the correct term. You could start to move in on them. They'd be okay. And almost managed to touch a few of them just when I started to experiment with that. So I think it's in part a learned behavior because it can, I think, be unlearned. Difficult, but they do start to build trust in creatures in their environment as they become routine. So I would take that as an observation to be noted to suggest that possibly they are trained by the older rabbits that, hey, this thing comes by, run. And so they're like, well, everyone for generations has ran, so I'll run too. So that could be a toss-up of both. But yes, and so that becomes our ultimate theory on freeze and dash is that it evolved over time through mainly learned behavior and some genetic behavior as a survival mechanism because they are small. They don't really have any fighting instincts. They're herbivores. So they have no defensive means beyond flight, over fight. And then our main proximate theory will be that these hypothesis here is that the mechanisms are, well, they're in connection to the developmental, probably, that through development over time of these traits, probably the mechanistic, they're mainly triggered by noise, it seems to be their primary sense, and so it helps them to develop the really long ears that are really recognizable, as you can see right there on that guy, how his ears are sticking right up, and then they bolt. And so yeah, that concludes this.